Reptile keepers, if you lost power today, would you be prepared? When you work with cold-blooded critters, maintaining their heat is so important. And we're in the middle of winter right now, and winter is unpredictable. So let's talk about how you can make sure that you are prepared for a power outage should it happen. Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, welcome. My name is Zoe, but most people know me as ZA Reptiles. And today I'm going to give you some tips and tricks to make sure you are prepared in the event that you have a power outage. Now this is especially a big issue right now, being that we are in January. This video might come out in February, because I think February starts like tomorrow or the next day. Either way, we're in January, February. We're in the middle of winter, depending on where you live. But I live in New York. It is very snowy and icy and cold, and that kind of weather can definitely lead to power outages. And so you want to make sure you're prepared, because it's not just losing your power in the middle of summer. You could be losing your power when it's below freezing outside. In nature, the temperature is going to fluctuate a lot, and a lot of reptiles can handle fluctuations. But just make sure you know for each of your species what the lowest temperature they can withstand is. Some species can go all the way to 65, some you don't want to go lower than 75. So just make sure you know what that is, so you know whether or not there are certain animals that you need to take maybe more action for than others. So if you lose power, here are things you can do or things you should have on hand to be prepared. So if you are watching this right now because you are currently without power, I feel for you. I'm keeping my fingers crossed for you. Here's some tips. If you're watching this and you currently still have power, but you're thinking, I should probably be prepared should I ever lose power, make sure you make a shopping list and get these things on hand sooner than later. So the first thing I'm going to mention, and you should have these on hand anyway, not just for power outages, but emergencies in general or traveling, and that's making sure that you have some sort of tote, pillowcase, something that each animal can go in for transport or temporary housing, if you will. So for me, I have a ton of plastic bins ready to go from all the times that I have moved with my animals, but also because of my education business, I travel with my animals all the time. So I have a ton of bins that they can go in. I also have a ton of pillowcases and snake bags for my snakes. So if I ever needed to remove my animals and take them with me in an emergency, or just remove them from their enclosures and put them into a smaller space where I can regulate temperatures, that's what I would use this for. I'd put them into their containers or into their pillowcases so they're not sitting in their enclosures. Likewise, something else that's very helpful to have on hand are coolers, because coolers are meant to be insulated and not be quickly affected by the temperatures in the surrounding area. So it would be really helpful to have a cooler and then be able to take whatever container you put the animals in, whether it's pillowcases, little plastic bins, whatever it may be, taking that and putting it inside a cooler so you can kind of monitor the temperature inside the cooler and know that all of your animals are safe and secure in that kind of temperature controlled area. So now obviously if we've lost power, somehow we need to keep them warm without using power. So there's a couple of things that I would recommend. One being hand warmers, or like those shipping warmers that people use for shipping reptiles. Just be aware hand warmers do get very hot, so you don't want them directly in contact with your animals. What I'll do is I'll either wrap it in a towel, wrap it in another pillowcase. Whatever I do, I just make sure that it is not directly in contact with the animal. I do not put it directly inside of the pillowcase. I do not put it directly inside of the plastic bin the animal's in. I put it in the area, but not directly with the animal, because I do not want them touching it. So now let's use your cooler, for example. Say I've got ball pythons. I've got my 3 ball pythons. Let's say I put all 3 ball pythons in a pillowcase, and I put those pillowcases in the cooler. Now the pillowcases help keep the ball pythons separate, but those pillowcases go in the cooler now. I wrap a hand warmer in a towel, and I put it in the cooler. Now the cooler is trapping the heat in there and it is staying warm. Now, another thing you can do is get a thermometer with a probe and put that probe inside of the cooler or container, whatever you're using, so that way you can see the temperature without having to open and close and check it and whatever. Also good to have a temperature gun. Most of us have those because we're reptile keepers, but to be able to just point it in and check the temperature as well. but I like having the little thermometer with the probe so I can just look at the thermometer and get a rough idea of what the temperature is. Now, we're not going for basking temperatures. You don't have to worry about making it super hot. You just want a nice, comfortable temperature that the animals can be maintained at until you get power again. An alternative to hand warmers, especially if you still have running water and hot running water, are rubber water jugs, like these right here. I have a ton of these because of all the moving I did, and then because of programs. I like these because they're easy to refill and they don't create waste. So I'm not using hand warmers and throwing them away constantly. I can use these, fill them up with hot water, and reuse them. Reuse, reduce, recycle. So I have a whole bunch of these. They're pretty inexpensive. You can get them on Amazon. This would be a good place to mention that I do have kind of an emergency section on my Amazon storefront where I have a list of all the things that I'd recommend using or having on hand should you end up in an emergency with your reptiles, and these are included. Now, like I said, you have to have access to hot water in order for these to be useful for you, and they aren't going to last as long as something like a hand warmer would. So you are going to have to refill them and make sure you're monitoring them. I especially like to use these with my bigger animals. So like with Kronk, my Dumerals boa, because he does a lot of programs with me, I'll fill up one of these with warm water and put it in his bin with him. Same thing for like my blue-tongued skink. If it's really hot, tie it off in a pillowcase, wrap it in a towel, and then they can sit on top of it and stay nice and warm. Now, those are going to be my go-to methods, but there are two other methods that we can look at and that you can consider. One, especially if you have lots of reptiles, it can be very hard to remove lots of reptiles and to pack them into bins and pack them into coolers. So if you have lots of reptiles, it might be worth it looking at getting a generator. Obviously, you want a gas power generator, but a generator, that way you can still supply power to your reptile enclosures, especially if you have reptiles that are a little more sensitive. Now, this is a more costly option, so a lot of people don't have this, especially if you only have a couple of reptiles. Some people, especially if you're a homeowner, have generators on hand already anyway in case of emergencies. But if you have lots of reptiles, getting a gas power generator might be a good idea for you, especially if you live somewhere where the winters can be quite harsh. Now, the other thing you can do, and I have personally done this, is use your own body heat. This isn't going to work if you have a very long power outage, but if it's a short power outage or only a couple hours long, you can use your body heat. Again, this only really works if you have a couple animals. If you have a lot of animals, you can't stuff them all into your jacket or into your hoodie. So now that I've kind of talked about different ideas, different suggestions, different products, I'm going to give you a scenario, a real life scenario of the time that I had to deal with a power outage. Now, this actually happened when I first started YouTube, so I actually have it all on video. You can watch it right here or right here. I don't know which side it pops up on. This was the beginning of my YouTube days, so no judgment. But it does give you a good idea of kind of what I did in that scenario. So at the time, I only had a small handful of animals. I had my iguana, and then I had a couple smaller animals, some baby snakes, baby gecko. I don't even know if I had my crested gecko yet. I must have. But either way, I had a small cooler, and because I had just recently gotten those animals, I still had their little expo containers. So I just put them back into their expo containers, put them in the cooler, and I had the hot water jugs from traveling with my iguana, and I filled it up with hot water. And I think I actually had hand warmers on hand. I was ready. So I had hand warmers, I wrapped them up, I put them in that small cooler with the baby animals. So it was just a small square cooler, but they fit in there. And then I had my temperature, my thermometer with the probe, so I could just check it and see how it was going. Now this happened, the power went out early in the morning. So we're talking like, I don't even know, maybe 6 o'clock in the morning. It was supposed to be the first day of my aquarium internship. So when I was doing all of this, I knew I couldn't go to the aquarium. I had reptiles to care for because it was also cold outside. It was freezing cold. So I just remember I had to call the aquarium and leave a message because obviously no one was there yet. But what I did was I packed those small animals into the cooler, and then I took my iguana, who was still sleeping, and I put a hoodie on, put him inside the hoodie, and then I wrapped up in a blanket, and then I crawled back into bed. And we just laid in bed, and he soaked up my body heat and got nice and warm. And of course this worked great until he got nice and warm, and then was active and awake and wanted to move around. And I was like, no, it's still freezing in here. Stay snuggling with me. But we did snuggle for most of the morning while the other baby animals were in a cooler. And this worked great. The power came back on by probably 9:30, 10 o'clock. So all was okay. But for the morning, I did snuggle in bed with my iguana and use my body heat to keep him warm. So there are a lot of different things you can do in a power outage to help keep your reptiles safe. You have to prepare ahead of time. Always prepare for the worst because you never know when it's going to happen. And when stuff like that happens, everyone's trying to buy out the hand warmers. So you want to make sure you definitely have some on hand for your cold-blooded critters. So again, That Amazon storefront link will be down below, so you can just look at the list, see all the different things we've talked about, some different ideas of what you should have on hand for emergencies. And if you have any other ideas, or you've dealt with power outages, maybe massive power outages, and you have other tips, leave them in the comments below. We're all about learning and growing here. And as always, thank you guys for watching. We'll see you for the next video. Bye!